It's the Halloween season, which means it's the perfect time to celebrate the spooky side of Pokémon by attempting a hardcore Nuzlocke using only Ghost-type Pokémon. The Ghost type used to be the rarest typing in the early generations of the series, but in the Paldea region of Scarlet and Violet, there's actually a surprising number of Ghost types available, and even more so when you include the Teal Mask DLC. So in the spirit of the season, I thought it would be fun to take on the challenge of beating Pokémon Violet while being limited to just one Ghost-type encounter per area of Paldea and Kitakami. Let's see if a team of ghostly ghouls and gaunt gas can haunt their way to victory against champions, robotic monstrosities, and misunderstood juvenile delinquents. After stretching my legs and relearning how to run, I pick up my starter, Freddy the Fuecoco. He won't become a Ghost-type until his final evolution, but he does get to help us catch our first true ghost, a ghastly I find haunting the ruins of South Area Province 1. I name him Slimer, and unfortunately, he's got his work cut out for him. He's the only ghost type available for our first real challenge, taking on Nemona's Sprigatito and terastallized Palmy at the gates of Mesagoza. We start by putting our Sprigatito to sleep with hypnosis, but it doesn't end up helping much, as it just wakes up on the next turn. After a payback, I switch gears and go for Confuse Ray, which ends up being equally unreliable, as it gets off a Tail Whip, then shrugs off the confusion the next turn. So I try one more time with using Confuse Ray, but it fights confusion again to continue landing leafages. But the next turn it finally hits itself, so another payback can finally take Sprigatito down. Now comes the real threat, her terastallized Palmy. Slimer is already in a precarious position, but I have to try another Confuse Ray. But as usual, it fights through to get off a Terra boosted Thundershock that leaves Slimer with just 4 HP. But I have a trick up my sleeve. Before the battle, I taught Slimer the rest TM, and with a Hell Chesto Berry, he wakes up right away, giving us a much-needed reset. Palmy thankfully hits himself this time, but on the next turn, a payback triggers its static ability, paralyzing Slimer. But as long as it doesn't fully paralyze, this actually works out in our favor. Since paralysis causes Slimer to go second, it actually increases the power of payback, meaning after another Thundershock brings him into the red, a boosted payback is just enough to get the KO. Slimer survives our first major roadblock with a bit of luck, and after I, the player, survive the lengthy story arc introductions, we can finally set out and grab our next encounters to round out our starting team. In South Province 2, I find a Mischievous I name Agatha, then in South Province 3 I find a Charcadet I name Ichigo, who ends up having a jolly nature, pretty much the perfect nature for him. But similar to Freddy, Ichigo isn't a ghost type yet, so he'll be sitting out for a good chunk of the run. That means it's just Slimer and Agatha taking on our first gym battle against Katie. But thanks to the Acid Spray TM we picked up nearby, and an Oran Berry to keep him healthy, Slimer easily melts his way through Katie's entire team on his own without any issues. Then for the Titan Clough, Agatha just needs to let loose a few Grass Knots to take down both phases. A pretty good starting performance for our first two teammates. But moving forward, they won't be able to do it alone. So I make a stop in East Province 1 to catch a Shuppet I name Spooky, giving the team a bit more firepower. And after wrangling up some choppy Sunflora, I don't have a Switch 2 yet. We're ready to face off against Brassius. The battle starts much like the one against Katie. Slimer takes out his Petalil and Smoliv with a couple acid sprays each, while taking barely any damage from their resistant grass attacks. But his grass Terra Sudowoodo is a different kind of beast. I go for our tried and tested strategy of going for Confuse Ray and praying it'll hit itself. It doesn't. Instead, Sudowoodo lands a critical hit Trailblaze that brings Slimer into the red. He heals a bit thanks to a held Oran Berry, but because of the critical hit and Trailblaze speed boost, there isn't much I can do without risking the rest of the team. So I make the tough call to leave Slimer in. He still outspeeds to get off another Acid Spray, but a Rock Throw takes him out, giving us our first death of the run. Thanks to Slimer's sacrifice, Agatha can come in safely and fire off a Psybeam, but it's not quite enough to take Sudowoodo down. It then fights through confusion again to get off another Trailblaze and boost its speed even higher. But even with 2 speed boosts, Agatha is still faster, meaning a second Psybeam can finally take it down, winning us our second gym badge. But it comes at the cost of our starter that made this run possible in the first place. And with Slimer gone, now we have a bit of a problem. The encounters available at this point are slim to none, and our current team of 2 won't be enough for the next couple of fights. So I figure it's time to change things up by accessing the Teal Mask DLC. I make our way to Kitakami, and at the Reveler's Road, I find another ghostly encounter, a Poltergeist I named Clyde. He comes with a pretty useful timid nature, but the coolest thing about him is that he happens to come in the rare Artisan form. That's pretty cool. I was not expecting that kind of luck. But authenticity won't help much when taking on the Titan Bombardier. After Spooky starts off by burning it with a will-o-wisp, it's up to Agatha to finish off the first phase. The burn cuts down the damage of a wing attack coming in, then Agatha just needs to spam Draining Kiss to stay healthy. For its second phase, I can't risk losing Spooky going for a second burn, so I immediately switch back to Agatha again, hoping Arven's Knackley will draw its attention. Which thankfully it does. This time I go for a Thunder Wave to slow it down, while Arven and I both whittle away at it with some smackdowns and Draining Kisses, eventually bringing it down. But next up is Team Star's Giacomo and his Dark types. What is normally considered the easiest Team Star fight in the game is a bit of a logistical nightmare with a team of Pokemon weak to Dark types. So to give us the edge, I need to do a bit of exploring. First I head over to the beach in East Province 2 to find a sandy ghast I named Gaster. Then back in Kitakami, I sneak my way into the Timeless Woods, and while dodging some high-level Pokemon, I manage to find a Dust Stone to evolve Agatha into Miss Magius. Then I locate the Masterpiece Cup needed to evolve Artisan Form Clyde into Sinistcha. Last but not least, I head back to West Province 1 to catch a Sableye in a cave, which I name Booberry, who gets the honor of starting us off against Giacomo's Poniard, who goes down easy with a single low sweep, but not before Metal Claw deals about a third. Giacomo's Starmobile is next, and after an Intimidate, Booberry's next low sweep can't do much. A Metal Sound lowers his special defense, and I go for a Detect to block a Snarl the following turn. I was hoping that the speed drop from his low sweep would be enough for Booberry to outspeed and disable it, but that was a bit of a tall order for him, cause I had completely forgotten that the Starmobiles are immune to status moves. So much for what I thought was a perfect strategy. So thanks to my blunder, a second Snarl brings Booberry into the red, and even after healing with an Oranberry, there isn't much I can do now. Nobody on the team can come in safely, so with a heavy heart, I leave Booberry in, and he ends up getting knocked out by another Snarl. This allows me to bring in Clyde safely, who I have terrestrialized into a pure grass type, eliminating his dark type weakness. After a Metal Sound, Clyde starts going to town with repeated Machagachas to stay healthy, even after repeated Snarls keep lowering his special attack. And after dodging one final Snarl, Clyde lands the finishing blow, winning us our trickiest fight so far, but at the cost of our newest team member. But in exchange, I can move ahead a bit to gather some Sinistcha Cups outside of Zapapico, and trade them in for the Malicious Armor, letting me evolve Ichigo into Ceruledge, and finally giving the team some major firepower. He's put to good use right away, giving us an easy solo victory against Nemona, and after that we immediately continue with the gym battle against Iono. I start with Gaster, who takes out her Wattrel with a couple Rock Tombs, and after that it's Clyde's time to shine again. He comes in on a super effective bite from her Luxio, then on the next turn I have him Terrestrialize that gets rid of his Ghost typing, which does 3 things. Removes his weaknesses, keeps him healthy, and deals a crap ton of damage. Luxio goes down, followed by Belly Bolt, but not before annoyingly missing with Machagacha twice, which risks him getting paralyzed from a couple sparks. Luckily, he gets through to face off against Miss Magius, and while Terrestrializing removed his weakness to Hex, it still hits for some decent damage. But, like before, spilling Matcha Lattes keeps his health up, and after fighting through confusion, a final Machagacha takes her down, winning us our 3rd badge. I return to East Province 3 to grab a Sinistcha I named Myrtle, then in the Asado Desert I catch a Bramblin I named Luke, and after taking my new pet Tumbleweed for a walk, he can evolve into Bramblegast. And after that, I make another trip back to Kitakami to find a Litwick on the Infernal Pass, who I name Vivian, our second Ghost Fire type. A bit redundant, but I bring her along just in case, since the next Team Star fight is against Mela and her own fire types. I start with Spooky against her Torkoal. Why Spooky? To set up Rain Dance, of course. This gets rid of Torkoal's Sun, which ends up lowering the power of its Flame Wheel. Once that's done, I switch over to Clyde, and normally he'd be pretty vulnerable to fire-type attacks, but with the rain, he can easily shrug off another Flame Wheel before firing off a powered-up Scald that takes Torkoal out in a single hit. That immediately leaves her Starmobile, where another Scald deals over a third. But after a Screech, it's no longer safe to keep Clyde in. So I switch over to Ichigo, who negates a Blazing Torque coming in thanks to his Flash Fire ability, and with that, in addition to his Ghost typing, the Starmobile can do absolutely nothing to Ichigo besides Screech, meaning he can safely take it down after just a few Shadow Claws. Another Team Star base cleared. And after Agatha roasts the Alaskan Bullworm alive, twice over, I head over to South Province 4 to catch Johnny the Primate. His jolly nature is perfect, but it will still be a while until he can evolve into the Ghost type Annihilate. Then just north of there, I find a cracked pot to evolve Myrtle into Poltegeist, then head back to West Province 2 to grab Peeves the Rotom, who will be a huge help with the gym battle against Kofu and his water types. After his Electro Ball starts us off strong by bringing his Veluza below half, he manages to survive a critical hit Aqua Cutter before escaping safely with a Volt Switch the next turn. I send in Blook to take on Wugtrio, who manages to deal us another critical hit, but this time it's from a wimpy resisted Water Pulse. It does confuse him, but Blook fights through it to get a one-hit KO with a Trailblaze. Lastus is Water Terastallized Crabominable, and I end up misclicking and choosing Disable before it even attacks, giving it a free Terra-boosted Crabhammer. But Blook covers for my mistake by fighting through confusion again, and lands a successful Disable the next turn. This lets me bring in Clyde safely, as now its only attacking moves are completely ineffective against my team of ghosts. So after a couple scalding hot matcha lattes, we earn ourselves another easy gym victory. Afterwards, I go ahead and grab a couple new encounters. Back over in Kitakami's Wistful Fields, I find a Sensu-style Oricorio I name Sadako. Then before taking on the next Team Star fight, I pick up a Mimikyu in the Tag Tree Thicket named Samara. But since the next Team Star boss Atticus uses poison types, she'll have to sit it out. Peeves starts off against his Skuntank, and I take advantage of its usual habit of starting with a Sucker Punch by connecting with a Will-O-Wisp. On the second try, connecting with a Will-O-Miss is always a bit of a gamble. After the second one connects, I follow up with Confuse Ray, then get off an Electro Ball the next turn as Skuntank fights Confusion to go for a Toxic. I decide to keep Peeves in to try and finish it off with a Volt Switch, and thankfully, Skuntank's next attempt at a Sucker Punch ends with it hurting itself in Confusion. It goes down, and I can bring in Myrtle for free as Atticus sends out Reverum next. An Iron Head deals a good amount of damage, but a Strength Sap completely heals Myrtle while lowering its attack. The speed boost from her Weak Armor ability allows her to outspeed the next turn, meaning the next Iron Head now just does under half. But at this rate, along with the defense drops, we won't be making much progress. So I decide to start attacking, but a Psybeam barely scratches it, and an Assurance ends up taking down Myrtle. It's a bit of a bummer, since this was Myrtle's first major battle, but we have to move on. I send out Ichigo to take over and finish the job with a Flame Charge and some Rocky Helmet Chip. Muck is next, and while a Shadow Claw isn't enough to bring it even below half, he does manage to take a Sludge Wave without getting poisoned. I then pivot to Agatha, who tanks a couple more Sludge Waves, then takes it down with 2 Psybeams. That leaves us Atticus's Starmobile, and another Psybeam does a decent chunk of damage, but the damage from its spin out leaves her vulnerable. So I switch over to Sadako, whose bold nature gives her a bit more defensive wiggle room. She tanks a Flame Charge and Spin Out, then can finally lower its attack with a Feather Dance. At this point, Sadako is perfectly safe to alternate between using Roost and Air Slash, methodically taking down the Starmobile without any issues. To this day, I'm not sure which is worse, losing a Mon that's been with you since the beginning, or losing one before it ever gets the chance to shine. Well, there's no time to dwell on losses, we gotta get back to catching more ghosts. I head on to West Province 3, where I catch a Grievard I name Zero. She immediately evolves into Houndstone, and then not too long after, our starter Freddy finally reaches the level to evolve into Skeledirge, officially rejoining the team in time for the fight against Larry. We start off with Samara using Hone Claws to up her attack and accuracy, while Larry's Kamala uses Yawn. But since she's holding a Chesto Berry, she's safe to get off another Hone Claws the next turn, which works out perfectly since Kamala just goes for Yawn again, probably expecting a switch. After Samara wakes up, a Drain Punch gets a clean KO, while another brings to Dunsparce below half. It does paralyze with a Glare, so I decide to switch over to Agatha, whose Levitate allows her to dodge a Drill Run coming in. It does land another Glare the next turn, but since it doesn't have any attacking moves that can actually hit Agatha, she can safely let loose a couple Power Gems to take it down. Last is Staraptor, who can still hit hard with Aerial Ace, so I swap to Peeves to resist. But without a weakness to electric attacks due to terastallizing into a pure normal type, Peeves' Shockwaves aren't powerful enough to take it down on his own. So after Peeves brings Staraptor down to a sliver, I pivot over to Ichigo, who takes one last hit and lets his Rocky Helmet do the work to finish off Staraptor and get us our 5th badge. The rematch against Nemona right afterwards goes off without a hitch, and we continue to round out the team with some new catches and evolutions. First, Spooky evolves into Bayonet, then Johnny gets angry enough to evolve into Annihilate, and finally join the squad. Then in Dali Zappa Passage, I find a Snowrunt I name Yuki, and with a Dawnstone she can immediately evolve into Frostlass. Then finally, Gaster evolves into Palisand, and with that, we're finally ready to take on the Ghost on Ghost double battle against Rhyme. I lead with Ichigo and Agatha against her Mimikyu and Bayonet, and start with immediately terastallizing Ichigo into a pure fire type. After Agatha uses Charm on Mimikyu to lower its attack, a single Shadow Claw takes out Bayonet. Her Mimikyu just sets up a light screen, and then out comes Houndstone while my team gets an immediate Omni boost from the crowd. Nice. On the next turn, Agatha's Hex breaks Mimikyu's disguise, then another Shadow Claw from Ichigo lands a lucky crit, taking it out before it can do anything. Her Houndstone goes for Phantom Force and disappears, as Rhyme's Toxtricity takes the field. But with more stat boost from the crowd, this fight is already as good as won. Another Shadow Claw takes down Toxtricity in a single hit, and then I make a good call in swapping Agatha out for Gaster, as Houndstone comes back in to hit over half. That definitely would have killed Agatha had she stayed in. Rhyme just gets a measly accuracy boost from the crowd in return, so with one more Shadow Claw, Houndstone falls, and we've officially proven who the real master of the Ghost type is. With the new level cap, Vivian can evolve all the way into Chandelure, and then after Johnny Drain punches his way through the Iron Treads Titan, and another easy fight against Nemona, we can finally get to the part we've all been waiting for. Emotional Aerobics class! No, it's just our next gym battle against Tulip. And with her team of Psychic types, you would think this fight would be a breeze, but some of her Pokemon are packing a move that's super effective to the majority of my team. So we have to get a little creative, starting with our opening move against Farigiraf. He knows Crunch is the bulkiest member of her team, and is immune to Ghost-type attacks, so it's crucial that he goes down as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that? By teaching Johnny Fling, and having him hold a Heartstone. Doing so gives Johnny a 100 base power Dark-type move that actually ends up getting the critical hit, taking Farigiraf down in one blow. It's hard to say if the critical hit was necessary without running into Calx, but hey, I'll take it. We're not out of the woods yet, though. Next up is Gardevoir, and I switch over to Agatha thinking she can decently tank coming in, but Psychic does very close to half. It's risky, but I decide to keep her in to get off a Shadow Ball. That also ends up critting. Luck is definitely on our side today. Then comes a Spathra, and I'm very glad that Agatha is still in. Since a Spathra is another potential threat thanks to knowing Shadow Ball, I went ahead and taught Agatha Imprison. Because Agatha knows Shadow Ball as well, it can no longer pose a real threat. Which in my mind was a pretty clever trick I came up with to make me feel smart, but another Shadow Ball from Agatha just plain takes it out in one hit, so it really wasn't necessary. Last is Florges, and I risk keeping Agatha in as it terastallizes. I go for a Mythical Fire, which lowers its special attack just enough for Agatha to survive, and allows us to more safely switch in Ichigo. He tanks a Psychic with ease, and a final Shadow Claw seals our victory. It's hard to say if the shake-up of strategy really tilted the win in my favor, but it was still pretty fun to try. By comparison, the next gym battle against Grusha is a bit more straightforward. It surely helps to have 3 Fire Ghost types at our disposal to take on his Ice types, though we only end up needing just one. Because Ichigo just learned his signature move, Bitter Blade, and he immediately puts it to good use, completely roasting Grusha's Frostmoth, Beartic, Satitan, and his terastallized Altaria. And just like that, our final gym badge is secured. I have a couple more encounters, one of which I'm super excited to get. But first, I head to the snowy part of Casaroya Lake, where I find the rare Spiritomb, which I name Yami. Then I go ahead and locate a tower in North Province 1 to finally find myself a Gimmighoul. And since I've been spending the whole playthrough scrounging up the required Gimmighoul coins, he can evolve right away, adding Mettaton the Goldengo to the team. And not a moment too soon, since Team Star's Ortega is up next. I start with Clyde to set up a Reflect, then after his Azumarill goes for a pointless charm, it gets hit with a strong Matcha Gotcha. When it goes for a bounce, I take the prime opportunity to swap in Mettaton to make his grand debut. Without the fear of paralysis due to his good as gold ability, Mettaton barely gets a tickle from Azumarill landing, and easily takes it out the next turn with a Shadow Ball. Darkspawn comes in next, and after a crunch, it gets one-shotted with a Steel Beam. Mettaton takes a massive amount of recoil, but against Ortega's Wigglytuff, Mettaton is safe to recover on the next turn. Wigglytuff does land a critical hit Play Rough, but it wasn't going to do much anyway. Another recover tops him off, and then another powerful Steel Brain brings her down. Last is Ortega's Starmobile, but there is virtually nothing it can do to Mettaton. He heals with another recover, then fires off another Steel Beam. But this one is almost too powerful, as the recoil alone leaves him in the range of a critical hit. So we unfortunately won't be getting another solo sweep. Instead, I switch over to Gaster, who gets immediately confused from a Magical Torque, causing him to hit himself the next turn. A couple more Magical Torques puts him in the red, but he manages to fight through his second turn, landing a sludge bomb to deal the finishing blow. With that victory, we have just one more team star battle to go, but first we have one last Titan to deal with. So I decide to make one last trip to Kitakami, to the lake in the Timeless Woods, where I find a white-striped basculin I name Casper, and after some self-flagellation, he evolves into Basculegion. Back at Castaroya Lake, we face off against the Titan Dondozo, whose first phase Agatha takes care of with a couple of grass knots, then Mettaton cleans up the second phase. The Titan Tatsugiri, though, takes a bit more effort, thanks to an accuracy drop from muddy water slowing us down, and Arvin's Greedent even gets taken out in the process. Mettaton can get it into the red, but we end up needing our newest member to make the finishing blow. A little tougher than anticipated, but that wraps up all 5 Titans. And speaking of taking care of things, before taking on our final Team Star fight, I can snag the last viable encounter of the run, which I find in North Province 2. Whisper the Dreepy joins the team, and her adamant nature could not be any better, although we're just below the level cap before she can fully evolve. So to get us to that level, we have to take down Eri and her fighting types, starting with her Toxicroak. Knowing it has Sucker Punch, I open with Agatha using Charm, allowing her to easily survive the hit on the second turn before a Psychic takes it down. Lucario's next, so I pivot to Ichigo, who tanks a Dark Pulse to stay above half health, then a Bitter Blade the next turn gets a one-hit KO and heals him back to full HP. A Psycho Cut does about half to pass Simeon, who lands a Rock Tomb that lowers his speed. It's a major risk, but I keep Ichigo in to be outsped the next turn. But he survives a second Rock Tomb and lands another Bitter Blade to take past Simeon down. Annihilate is next, so I bring in Yami, who decently tanks a Rage Fist and Fire Punch before burning it with a Will-O-Wisp. Thanks to the attack drop and Leftovers recovery, Yami can easily tank further hits, and a couple Shadow Balls later, Annihilate falls. We're finally down to the Starmobile, so I switch over to Sadako, who takes a spin out on entry, then lowers its attack with a Feather Dance. It uses Gear Shift to offset the speed drop from its previous spin out, but another Feather Dance keeps its attack in check. Thanks to that, Sadako is relatively safe to fire off some air slashes as the Starmobile tries to raise its attack stat, but it's already too late. A third air slash lands, taking down the Starmobile, earning us our 5th and final Team Star victory. We're finally in the endgame, but there are still a lot of battles to get through, starting with Director Clavel. Our strategy starts simple, with Ichigo taking on his Oranguru with a couple Bitter Blades, while clearing up sleep from a yawn with a Health Chesto Berry. A single Shadow Claw takes down his Poltergeist in a single hit, then comes Houndoom. I switch in Casper, but a super effective Dark Pulse does over half. Not good. I'm starting to regret my team choice at this point, but I remember I still have a get out of jail free card in Samara, whose disguise can take another Dark Pulse as she comes in. Thankfully, she outspeeds the next turn, landing a Drain Punch that brings it down to a quarter, while a Fire Blast brings her below half, activating her held Citrus Berry. After another Drain Punch, Houndoom falls, and Samara is back to nearly full health. Amoonguss is next, so I pivot to Mettaton, who negates the Spore. Then I make another switch to Johnny, hoping it would choose a different move, but it just goes for Spore again, putting Johnny to sleep. I decide to keep him in case he wakes up, but a powered up Hex ends up critting, nearly taking out Johnny. So I switch over to Ichigo, hoping it doesn't use Spore again. Thankfully, it ends up going for another Hex, meaning a Bitter Blade the next turn nets us another one-hit KO, and the same goes for Clavel's Abomasnow. Last is Quaquaval, and I decide to risk keeping Ichigo in to luckily connect a crucial Will-O-Wisp, and boy did we need it. Even with the attack reduction, a Water Terra boosted Aqua Step deals enormous damage. I bring Samara back in to get off a priority Baby Doll Eyes, which lets her just barely survive the next Aqua Step, but also gives us the opportunity to bring in Agatha more safely. She tanks the next 2 Aqua Steps fairly well, then recovers a bit with a Draining Kiss. But on the next turn, Quaquaval gets a critical hit, taking Agatha down. She was one of my most important team members throughout this run, but it was only a matter of time before one of them would end up on the receiving end of an unlucky crit, and it just had to be her. So I bring in Mettaton, who terastallizes and finishes the fight with a boosted Shadow Ball. In hindsight, I definitely could have handled the end of the fight a bit more efficiently if I just brought Mettaton in right away instead. But to make up for my mistake, Whisper can now fully evolve into Dragapult and officially join the team for the Gauntlet of Elite Four battles. Against Rika, Gastra ends up being the perfect opener. And when you add a Held Absorb Bulb that raises his special attack when hit with a Water-type attack, it results in an unkillable monstrosity that Giga Drains Rika's entire team until there's nothing left. Poppy then faces a similar fate, With a held throat spray, Freddy's first torch song gets a double special attack boost, letting him completely melt down her team of steel types like it's nothing. But starting with Larry, the solo sweeps come to an end. Ichigo easily takes out his Tropius with a super effective Bitter Blade, but his Staraptor comes in and intimidates and threatens with Brave Bird. I opt for Will-O-Wisp instead, which gives Ichigo some breathing room to safely use a couple more Bitter Blades, which along with the burn damage, eventually take it down. Altaria is next, and I switch to Freddy who tanks a couple Dragon Pulses, then uses Snarl to lower its special attack. This lets us bring in Mettaton safely, and severely mitigates the power of a super effective Flamethrower, before a couple Power Gems take Altaria down. Then his Oricorio ends up surviving another Power Gem on what must be 1 HP, so after a strong Revelation Dance, I have to pivot to Gaster. I have him Terastallize, then he proceeds to fight through a Teeter Dance-induced confusion, allowing him to finish off Oricorio, and leave us with just Flamigo to deal with. A Brave Bird hits Gaster below half, but he fights through confusion a second time to land a strong Stone Edge. I switch to Samara to tank another Brave Bird, then a Baby Doll Eyes ensures she'll survive next turn, forcing the recoil to knock itself out, giving us our third win. Next up is Hassel, and we started off lucky with his Noiver missing an Air Slash, letting Yuki knock it out with one hit with a quad effective Ice Beam. Haxorus is a bit too powerful to handle in case another Ice Beam isn't enough, so I switch to Mettaton, who takes a super effective Crunch coming in. I then realized that probably wasn't the best choice, so I pivot to Johnny instead, who ends up getting the defense drop. We're still risking it, but I go for a Drain Punch, which ends up being necessary as a Dragon Claw brings them down into the red. But I know now that Johnny is faster, so a close combat the next turn finishes off Haxorus. Flapple is next, and I decide to bring back Mettaton, but there isn't much Flapple can do to him. I go for Recover for a couple turns to get him back to full health, while Dragon Rush barely scratches him. A couple Dazzling Gleams take it down, then Dragalge goes down as well after a few Shadow Balls, while only being able to connect with one of its Hydro Pumps. Last but not least is Havel's Terastallized Baxcalibur, and no matter what, someone on the team is going to have to take a big chunk of damage. Is what I would say if we didn't have Samara on our side. She comes in and negates a Glaive Rush, then a Terra Fairy boosted Play Rough ends up dealing massive damage. He even misses an Icicle Crash the next turn, so we don't even need Samara's Disguise to take a hit. One more Play Rough, and the entire Elite Four is officially defeated. Well, there is one more. Last and close to least is the supposed top champion of Paldea, Gita. Whisper finally gets to see some action, starting with a 2-turn Phantom Force that one-shots at Spathra. She U-turns out against Go-Goat, allowing Ichigo to come in, while Go-Goat tries to set up a bulk up. But a single Bitter Blade is still more than enough to take it down. Epilogue is next, and I decide to play it safe by starting with a Will-O-Wisp to weaken its super effective Earthquake, then Ichigo lands a couple Bitter Blades to keep him healthy, before Epilogue succumbs to global warming. Next up is King Gambit, powered up with its Supreme Overloader ability, but it does nothing to stop a Terrafire boosted Bitter Blade from deleting him from existence. Against Veluza, I switch to Mettaton, who takes a Liquidation coming in before finishing it with a Shadow Ball, and just like that, we're already down to her ace Glamora, who is easily bribed into surrendering the fight with a little coin. Boring, but effective. Nonetheless, we've successfully swept the Elite Four and Champion without a single loss, leaving us in a good position to take on the final battles. Our final fight against Arven kicks off with Johnny taking out his Greedent with a single close combat, then I bring in Whisper against Scovillain, who tanks a Zen Headbutt coming in. Then a couple turns later, a Fly gets us another one-hit KO. Garganackle is next, so I U-turn over to Clyde as it just throws up some Stealth Rocks. I set up a Reflect to reduce the damage of its Stone Edges, then a Machagacha and Scald finish it off. Toadscruel comes in and outspeeds, poisoning Clyde with its second Sludge Bomb, but the healing from his Machagachas keeps him healthy enough to take it down without much fuss. Against Cloyster, I'm forced to pivot over to Freddy, but even after it sets up a light screen, a Torch Song still does about half, while boosting his special attack. Our Reflect wears off at this point, but it's totally fine. Freddy Terastallizes, and after another Torch Song takes Cloyster out, he ends up with more than enough power to take out Arven's Mabostiff. He just needs to survive one last attack, a Dark Terra boosted Crunch, which he does on just 31 HP. And with that, one last Torch Song. Freddy is at +3 special attack. Why is that still not enough? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Either way, there's nothing to worry about. I switch to Samara, who once again can negate an attack with Disguise, allowing her held Rocky Helmet to deal a final blow on Mabostiff, winning us the fight, and concluding the Titan storyline. And surprisingly, that ends up being the trickiest of our 3 rival fights. Against Penny, Ichigo faces off against her Umbreon, so I have him terrestrialize right away to eliminate his Dark-type weakness. This allows him the prime opportunity to easily set up to +6 attack with a few sword dances, then go absolutely ham on her entire team. Wait, what about her entire team knowing baby doll eyes? Not a problem, a held clear amulet will clear it right up. As in, make sure it never happens. I honestly felt kind of bad for how easy this fight ended up being. And against Nemona, Johnny is next to steal the show. All he has to do is Drain Punch. Over, and over, and over, and over again, until an Ice Punch is needed to finish off her Gudra. But I couldn't let Johnny take all of the glory. For the final showdown against Nemona's starter, Meowscarada, I figured it wouldn't be right if Freddy didn't get the chance. So he comes in, takes virtually nothing from a Plate Rough, terrestrializes, and unleashes a single Torch Song to take Meowscarada down in a single hit, giving us our final, definitive victory against Champion Nemona. Now that all 3 story arcs are complete, it's finally time for us to delve into the depths of Area Zero for the true final fight of the game against AI Turo and his team of future Paradox Pokémon. We've suffered some tough losses along the way, but I'm confident that my final team of ghosts will bring us victory in the very end. Our final battle starts with Gastra facing Iron Moth. A fiery dance brings him below half, but he fires back with an earthquake that wipes out in a single hit. Next up is Iron Jugulus, so I switch over to Johnny, one of my 2 team members who isn't weak to Dark Pulse. And after the recovery, an Air Slash brings him down to about a 4th. An Ice Punch the next turn takes it down, but Johnny is in a rough spot as Iron Bundle comes in next. I switch to Ichigo, who barely gets dented by a Drill Peck coming in, then gets nailed by a super effective critical hit Water Pulse, bringing him down to just 18 HP. Not only that, he ends up getting confused. If he hits himself, he is done. But he manages to fight through, landing a Bitter Blade, bringing Iron Bundle below half. That was close. He obviously can't stay in at this point, so I bring in Mettaton, who takes another Water Pulse without fear of confusion. On the next turn, Iron Bundle sets up the snow with Snowscape, allowing Mettaton to recover safely. But then it goes for another Snowscape? That's a little weird. Either way, this gives us a chance to finally take it down with the Shadow Ball, and Iron Thorns comes out next. And because it's packing Earthquake, I have to bring in Gaster, who easily survives 2 of them before he can recover a bit with a Giga Drain. But then a 3rd Earthquake from Iron Thorns ends up getting a critical hit, leaving him with just 10 HP. After just barely surviving, Gaster fires off his own Earthquake to take Iron Thorns down. Next up is Iron Hands, and I have to make a tough decision to keep Gaster in. I want to ensure that I'm in the best position to take on Turo's last Pokemon, and Iron Hands can hit hard on his own, threatening big damage if I switch. So, Gaster lets off one last Earthquake that brings Iron Hands below half, and then an Iron Head takes him down. His sacrifice won't be in vain though. I bring in Freddy to use Torch Song, which just barely doesn't KO, but still gives him a double special attack boost thanks to his held Throat Spray. The second Torch Song finishes it off, and with that, we're now down to Turo's last Pokemon, Iron Valiant. And thanks to the extra special attack boosts, Freddy has more than enough firepower to give us a definitive finish. No terror required. He fires off one last Torch Song, resulting in a clean one-hit KO. AI Turo is defeated, and with that, I have officially beaten a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Violet using only Ghost-type Pokemon. I've really had a lot of fun with this run. Ghost-type Pokemon have definitely become more varied and unique compared to their humble beginnings, and I hope this playthrough proved that. And if you enjoyed this run too, I'd really appreciate it if you liked, commented, and subscribed to my channel. Please let me know in the comments what other kinds of challenges you'd be interested in seeing, and as always, thank you for watching, and happy Halloween!